Kerr's been through and how he overcame such adversity to be the winner he is today.
And you just gave me the perfect segue, Jason, because you're absolutely right. He's a huge winner. And as you mentioned, he ends up winning the next year as well because they basically tear this team down to the studs. Spoiler alert, Jason, in the post Last Dance, the after party, it is a dud because in the next 4 seasons, the Bulls only win about 3 more games than they won in that last season. In the next 4 seasons combined. And everyone who was basically there is gone. By the time that they turn it around, everyone's gone. So the rebuild goes, let's say it poorly. And it begs the question of why not keep it together? Now, before we do this, I want to start the section by saying, in fairness, there's no way Scottie Pippen stays on the team. There's just none. The Bulls had, I believe, the highest salary in the league most of the last few years there. One of the non-mentioned plots here that we really should, for our journalistic integrity, mention is that this was a watered-down league at this point. The expansion teams had come in. There were a lot of expansion teams, a lot of really weak teams in the league. So it had really spread the talent out a little bit. And so as a result, the Bulls had basically hung on. And the main reason, Jason, is because they were paying Scottie Pippen nothing. They were paying him just peanuts to play on this team. And he was one of the top 10 players probably in the league. So when you have the number one player, you have another top 10 player, you have the level of depth that they had, which they were partially able to pay for because they weren't paying Scottie Pippen, it gave them that opportunity. So the biggest thing here is even if you fire Jerry Krause, it's going to be really hard to keep Scottie Pippen because he's not going to stay on a 1-year deal, and you're going to have to pay him a lot. He ends up getting paid something like 5 years, $62 million or something.
It was almost 70 from Houston.
Is it 72?
It was 5 years for like 69.7. I don't know why that number's embedded in my brain.
So he gets paid. It's 67. 67. I just checked. 5 years, $67 million contract.
I was closer than you.
You were absolutely right.
The price is right here.
But the Bulls were not paying that. Short version of this, the Bulls were not paying it. Jerry Reinsdorf said it very simply. And you know what? God bless Michael Jordan. He was not keeping Pippen there on a 1-year deal unless the Bulls were going to pay $20 million, and they were already paying Jordan 36 or so million. So they would have paid about $60 million between those two. Not happening with the rest of the contract. So before we get too much into this, I do want to preface for people, yes, there's a reason why this didn't happen, and that's because Jerry Reinsdorf was not paying them that much money. He had the highest salary there, and they cleaned up. The Bulls made more money after Jordan retired than they did while he played because the salary that he paid for all the players was like nothing. So there's a reason why this happened, and a lot of it was bottom line. But with that preface and that caveat, Jason, the question I have for you is if by some improbability they do keep this team together, they would have theoretically, and I don't even think it's all that theoretical because the East really wasn't that great the next year, they would have run up the next year against the young Spurs, Jason, who, let's say they keep it together. So those Spurs don't get Steve Kerr or Will Perdue. So Steve Kerr stays with the Bulls, let's say. This is a Spurs team then that's got Tim Duncan, Avery Johnson, David Robinson, Sean Elliott, Mario Elie, Jaren Jackson Sr., Jerome Kersey, and Antonio Daniels, plus Malik Rose coming off the bench. Very, very good team. Very good team that won that year. Crushed the Knicks. Do you think they would have had a chance for a 7th title against a team like that and the Spurs?
A chance, yes. Would they have won it? No. And I say that because look how tired they were. Michael Jordan, I think after that 6th title, was 33 years old. And just the mileage on his legs and the technology for rest and recovery is not what it is today. So guys like LeBron and KD, they have it made because of all the advancements. Jordan didn't have that. I don't think they would have gotten it done. I thought Phil was exhausted. He was right to take that year off because he knew it was time. They already had that beautiful ceremony where they all wrote down their feelings about their run they just went on. And put it into the fire, which I thought was really cool. They shared that at the end of the documentary. But he took that year off, and then look what he did. He won 5 more championships over the next decade with the Lakers. Went from coaching LeBron to coaching Kobe. I thought that it was meant to be over at that point because I did not think Chicago had the size to compete with Robinson and Duncan then. I know Dennis Rodman was great defensively, but I'm sorry, Bill Wennington is not guarding David Robinson in the finals. And I think that the West became too strong. And you saw the Jazz almost beat them. I mean, it went to 6 games both years. I think that that was it. They peaked. I mean, look what happened to Scotty. He made the playoffs every year in Houston and Portland. I think it was when he returned to the Bulls. That was the first time since maybe his rookie year that the Bulls, he was on a non-playoff team. So it was over. It was a good time to be over. I don't think Phil should have taken that deal. You know what? I came into this documentary with a preconceived notion that Jerry Krause was going to be this all-worldly villain. We don't know the real problems. Obviously, unfortunately, Krause was not here to defend himself on this documentary, so we don't know. But the relationships were so severed that the owner, the guy calling all the shots, couldn't even get Phil and Krause into a room to work on things. So just to sum up my novel that I just spoke for you here tonight, no, they should not have tried to run it back.
So I'm gonna partially agree with you, which is that I would say I think it would have been really tough for them to win. I think Michael Jordan, as good as he was tired, and he had just enough to get over the Jazz. And I think that Spurs team was better than the Jazz team. You're talking about a team that has Sean Elliott. Now, a big piece here that we're saying, I mean, if we keep the whole Bulls team together, if we're going to just assume that magically the Bulls pay an inordinate amount of money, and I do mean inordinate because Phil Jackson's getting a raise, Michael Jordan might be getting a raise, Steve Kerr's getting a raise, Scottie Pippen's getting a raise. All those guys are getting massive raises if they're doing a 1-year deal. So it's a big if, and to be honest, it's not happening. If it does, I think it would be a competitive series. The thing that would have been really fun about it, Jason, is as you mentioned, the Bulls really at that point would have had Dennis Rodman guarding Tim Duncan. And I don't think at that point in his career that Dennis Rodman would have been able to do that. Meanwhile, you've got no one guarding David Robinson. As you mentioned, Luke Longley, God bless Luke Longley, but he's not up to that challenge. But then on the flip side, you've got for the Spurs, I mean, who the heck is guarding Michael Jordan on this team? Is it Mario Elie? I mean, come on. He's not, that guy is not at that point he was 33 years old. Are you putting Sean Elliott on him, who's 30 at the end of his career? Avery Johnson? I mean, no way. And then one of those guys has to guard Michael Jordan, and the other guy has to guard Scottie Pippen. I mean, that is a tough one. So this could have been a really interesting series because unlike the series against the Jazz where there's guys to guard them, there's no one to guard the Bulls players really on the Spurs, but then there's no one on the Bulls to really guard the best players on the Spurs. So it could have been a really interesting series of kind of whatever the opposite of iron sharpening iron is, where you've got your strengths and weaknesses are completely flipped. And then Phil Jackson versus Greg Popovich, that would have been the first chapter of that. Could have come a little sooner than we thought.
We did see a lot of that
in the West, yeah.
Because of the lockout, it would have been, it wouldn't have been a terrible idea to bring the band back for a 7th because you're playing less games. You're starting the season in January. That was when Michael had announced.
It was even February.
Yeah, so it was a lockout shortened season. They had 6 months of no games, and that could have been some time for rest and recovery. But look, for the storybook ending, the Bulls got theirs, and I know they haven't been close since, and I know that breaks your heart. But the fact that they had that run, and no one can ever touch that, and now not only is it in the archives of NBA history, but now younger generations, starting with ours who were 7, 8 years old, and people that weren't even born during this run are able to watch and appreciate what this team accomplished. So I do want to get into some backlash. Well, you want to get into some backlash, and I'm agreeing to get into some backlash. But before we do that, I want to do a little MVP, LVP. of The Last Dance. So, Ben, it's only right you start off with your MVP of the whole documentary.
I can't believe we're not picking the same person. The MVP of this documentary is unequivocally Michael Jordan. He was gifable, memeable, everything you could ask for. Great quotes throughout. He kisses Doug Collins. He laughs at Gary Payton. He laughs at Byron Russell. He talks about his teammates when he first comes in doing cocaine. He has every line that you can imagine. They show him to be even more of a badass than we thought he was beforehand. I mean, I don't know who else could do what he did in this documentary. There was great things of him gambling with people, playing games with the security guards. He was an 11 out of 10 from the first minute of the documentary all the way to the end. All hail the GOAT, Michael Jordan. Unbelievable performance. Just to me, it's a runaway to Michael Jordan all the way. Although, honorable mention to Phil Jackson, who somehow managed to keep together this crazy collection of absolute nut jobs. You've got Dennis Rodman just running off to do wrestling in the middle of the finals unexcused. You've got Pippen saying, I'm not going to play because I'm pissed off about my contract. You've got Michael Jordan who's like punching people in practice. And Phil just holds it together. I mean, the guy is like super glue holding all these things together. Unbelievable performance by him as well. But I got to give it to Jordan. I mean, who do you got, Jason? I mean, I don't know how you didn't choose Jordan here.
Because everyone's choosing Jordan. Okay, just one quick anecdote on Phil. I thought that he knew his players well enough when they needed a break. He knew not to come down too hard on Rodman because he always showed up ready to play, was the heart and soul of the team, did the dirty work, the little things. So Phil letting the players be themselves went a long way in making that team what it was. But look, I know Michael Jordan seemed to have been a little worried about his image with this documentary because he came off as this tenacious leader, and if you didn't fall in line, look out. I thought he came out of this smelling like a bed of roses. No player's perfect, no human's perfect, and Michael was really one of the first superior athletes with, Y2K and then the social media boom. It was him, Muhammad Ali, and Tiger Woods, right? Those were like the three main guys. And then Derek Jeter, later on in baseball. He handled that way better than anyone could have ever expected. And I thought he came out looking great. But I couldn't pick him. People are picking him everywhere. So I'm going with Steve Kerr. I thought Kerr was amazing. His insight, we talked about him earlier. Just watching him being able to recap these things like they happened yesterday with everything that he went through with his dad. I just thought Kerr was there at the right time, even talking about things like before he joined the team. And the guy's just a winner. My respect for Steve Kerr tripled after watching The Last Dance. I thought he was great. I'm going to give a very slight honorable mention to Scott Burrell because the banter between him and MJ was incredibly hilarious. And when he said, Scotty, if I ever see you after this, I'm going to punch you in the face. Like, oh, my God. And then the trash talk to Larry Bird, which we can't say on here because we don't know if this podcast has a rating or not, but priceless. So
unbelievable.
That's my MVP. Had to go outside the box on that one. I don't care what anyone says. Sticking to it. And, Ben, do you want me to lead off my LVP or do you want to give your LVP?
I mean, spoiler alert, we have the same LVP like pretty much everyone who watched this show. So I'll kind of let you lead this one.
So I'm going to give it to production. I've been complaining for 5 weeks now. The frequent time lapses, being all over the place, going from 1998 to 1971, like, it was a little unnecessary. I thought either make it about just that season or do it in chronological order and just go from Jordan's years to the first title to this and do intermittent flashbacks. Like, I thought the Steve Kerr flashback to his childhood and his father made sense because that led into him winning that shot in 97, right? So that made sense. But so much of it could have been altered. And I don't want to fully bash them because they did bump this timeline up to release it earlier given the pandemic, and I appreciate that. But it was still a little all over the place, and that's well documented. But overall, I mean, it was a great documentary. It was exactly what we needed.
The number of times my wife Flo had to ask me, so when is this?